Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, November 12th, 2020. My name is Karen Bodenschatz. I serve as Associate Pastor at First Lutheran Church in Onalaska, Wisconsin. I almost forgot. Friends, I say this every time, and yet just that moment, I'm like, where do I serve again? Okay, let's try that again. I serve First Lutheran Church in Onalaska, Wisconsin, and this is our morning musing. That was weird. So I have been thinking about storytelling, and mostly because Pastor Stanton and I just did a Faith Alive University on the Gospel of Mark, which we're going to be entering into at the end of this month. The last Sunday of this month starts the church year anew. We'll be starting Advent. And so as I was looking at Mark, and my job was to kind of look at how Mark influences the world, I really began to notice or learn again, Mark was a consummate storyteller. So Mark's gospel is the shortest of the four gospels, but we do believe that it was the first one written, and that he then influenced Matthew and Luke. And then there's a whole bunch of other facts about that I won't bore you with right now, but that Mark was initially and originally told as a story verbally. And so that's why we get kind of this really fast movement through Mark. They're stories that are connected more by theme than by chronological order, and they're loosely kind of connected. And so there's always this sense in Mark that you just keep moving. And then this happened, and immediately is Mark's favorite word. But what Mark does in telling fewer stories is that he tells richer stories in detail. So we get a lot more details in the stories that Mark tells than we do in Matthew and Luke and John, the few that John tells that Mark tells. Details like names. He tells more stories about women. He just makes those stories longer and richer. And I love those details because really in the stories that we tell, what makes stories compelling are their details. And I feel like right now, we're not always interested in the details. We're not always interested in being pulled into a story, especially if it's a story about something that we just don't want to even know about. So I've been thinking a lot about the details that we tell in the stories that we tell, or the ones we choose not to tell a lot of details about. But how do we capture people's imagination? As a preacher, that's a really big question. How do I capture the imagination of those who are listening to me preach? And I was just listening to a podcast that was interviewing journalist John Meacham, who has two podcasts that I have been listening to. One is called It Was Said, and it's a whole bunch of speeches that kind of shaped the age that they were in. So everything from Martin Luther King to Barbara Jordan to Ronald Reagan, just a wide swath of people. And then he has another one, Hope Through History, that I've just started. But in this interview, he was talking about how when he tells a story as a journalist, things like, he doesn't just say the date, November 14, but he says it was Thursday, November 12th. Because little details like that, when we get really specific, then we place people in that story. And that's exactly what Mark does. Mark wanted to place those Gentiles who were hearing this story long after Jesus was dead into that story. And he's telling the story that he heard from Peter, we're pretty sure. And I think as followers of Jesus, it's in the details that we capture people. When we talk about what it means to be followers of Jesus, to be really specific about what that looks like. That looks like feeding the hungry. That looks like treating people with kindness and compassion. It looks like not being snarky, even when we want to be. It doesn't mean that we don't challenge people, but it means that we do that in a way that acknowledges who they are as human beings, which I think is compelling as we think about this Gospel of Mark that we're about to enter into, as we think about where we are as a country in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of transition of power. Like, how are we going to treat each other? And how are we going to be very specific about the ways that we do that? For me, right now, it's working really hard to treat people with kindness and compassion and humanity, even though everything in me sometimes, especially when I see the number of cases we have right now of COVID, just wants to scream and rail and get angry at people. To figure out how to take that anger and put it into words that would maybe draw people in is a challenge, but I think it is our challenge as followers of Jesus to lead the way, to stand up and be very specific about what we believe and how we believe it, and then do it, which would be completely Mark, because Mark is all about the doing. So I hope that you take some time to read a little bit more about the Gospel of Mark before we enter into this year of Mark, and to consider how you can be more specific in the ways that you talk, the stories that you share, that draw people into the grace of God, and perhaps draw people into seeing the stories of our fellow humans in a deeper way. I will see you on Saturday. Until then, be well, be kind, for Christ is with you.